Some people fear failure, others fear success. But the rarest and maybe the most painful fear is this, the fear of happiness. Because for some, joy doesn't feel like freedom, it feels like bait, a setup, a hand offered, only to be yanked away. And this is the fear that doesn't get talked about, the one no one posts about. Because honestly, how do you explain to someone that the very thing they think you should want feels dangerous? You don't. You hide it. You rationalize it. You tell yourself you're cautious, wise, realistic. You say you're just not trying to get your hopes up. But let's call it what it is. It's grief wearing armor. It's trust that never fully healed. It's your body remembering that the last time you felt safe, it didn't last. So now it won't let you feel safe at all. You win and brace. You fall in love and plan your exit. You get exactly what you prayed for and immediately wait for the catch. And it's not because you're dramatic or broken. It's because your nervous system remembers things your mind has tried to forget. There's a term for this, foreboding joy. Brené Brown called it the most terrifying of human emotions because joy requires vulnerability. And vulnerability, to someone shaped by trauma, feels like walking into a war zone without armor. But Carl Jung saw it even deeper. He wrote that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. What you avoid, what you flinch from, what you've buried in the name of safety, that's what rules you. And for some of us, the thing we flinch from most is happiness itself, because it reminds us of what we've lost, because it threatens to leave, because it whispers, maybe this time it'll be different, just like it did last time. So you play it safe, you keep joy at a distance. You cut the highs short so the lows don't hurt as much. And slowly your life becomes a masterpiece of muted color, not broken, just half alive. You survive birthdays, weddings, milestones, but never quite feel them. You live in the room next to joy, always with the door cracked, but never step fully in. And here's the truth no one tells you. This fear is not irrational, it's not dysfunction, it's not weakness. It's the strategy of someone who has been betrayed by beauty, of someone who learned that joy can turn, that good things can vanish, and that hope can hurt more than despair. Nietzsche once said, "Hope in reality is the worst of all evils because it prolongs the torments of man." And maybe part of you agrees, because to hope means to wait, and to wait means to suffer. So you turn away from hope. You numb yourself to anticipation. You try not to want anything too badly. But let me ask you something. Is this working? Are you actually less hurt or just less alive? And there's a cost to all this protection, and it's not just the pain you're trying to avoid. It's the joy you never get to feel. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Because you're not avoiding suffering anymore, you're living in it. Let's go deeper. There's something you need to see. Orpheus had one rule. He could lead his beloved Eurydice out of the underworld after pleading with death itself, so long as he didn't look back. He had to walk in front of her, trusting she was behind him, silent and unseen, until they reached the light. But he doubted, he feared. He stepped into the sun and looked back too soon. And in that instant he lost her forever, not because fate betrayed him, but because fear did. Because his inability to trust the goodness in front of him cost him the one thing he loved most. We do this every day. We look back every time something good begins to happen and we whisper to ourselves, "This can't be real." We ruin moments not because they weren't beautiful, but because we couldn't bear the thought of losing them. We self-sabotage joy, not because we don't want it, but because we want it too much, and losing it again would be unbearable. So we break our own hearts preemptively just to stay in control. You cancel the second date even though it felt different. You turn down the job because it seems too good. You pull away from the compliment, the affection, the opportunity, because deep down you don't trust it to stay. But here's the truth. You're not broken, you're conditioned. There's a concept in psychology called negativity bias, our brain's tendency to cling to pain more than pleasure. Because for most of human history, noticing the danger meant survival. But that wiring doesn't work so well when it comes to love or happiness or joy. Because joy asks you to trust something that might leave. And if your childhood, your past relationships, your deepest betrayals have taught you anything, it's this. What you love most doesn't always stay. So now you flinch. You test people. You don't dance at your own party. You kill the joy before it can die on its own. You think you're preparing for the worst, but all you're doing is fast-forwarding to it. Because by not letting joy in, you guarantee its absence. You feel the pain of loss without ever having felt the fullness of the love, and that is the cruelest illusion of all. You lose either way, but one path gave you something real, even if only for a moment. And the other kept you safe, but empty. Gibran wrote, "The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain." So maybe your fear is not proof that you're incapable of happiness. Maybe it's proof that you're capable of more of it than you know. Because joy feels scary when the vessel of your heart is deep. Because you've been carved by loss, by silence, by things that ended too soon. But what if that carving made you capable of holding something vast? What if joy for you will never be shallow again? Not because you're cursed, but because you've earned depth. Before we go further, ask yourself this. What joy have you been keeping outside the door? And what part of you still believes it's safer to expect the worst than receive the best? Don't judge the answer. Just notice it, because that's where we begin to turn. You didn't plan to go numb. It happened like most slow abandonments do. Quietly, strategically. You didn't shut your heart all at once. You closed it one disappointment at a time, the broken promise, the sudden silence, the joy that turned on you when you finally let your guard down. Each moment laid a brick, until one day what started as protection became a fortress. And that fortress forgot it ever had a door. Now, when something beautiful approaches, you don't open, you retreat. You call it discipline, maturity, emotional self-awareness, but it's not wisdom. It's fear, disguised in the language of self-preservation. Carl Jung once wrote, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." You didn't want to hurt again, so you dulled everything, including the beauty. You flattened the curve, muted the highs to avoid the lows. But the result wasn't peace. It was exile, emotional exile. A life where nothing really hurts, but nothing fully lands either. And here's the cruelty of it. You don't even look unhappy. You're functioning. You're fine. But inside, you're suffocating under a layer of permanent caution, a kind of self-imposed stillness. The joy you see in others doesn't feel possible for you anymore. Not because you don't want it, but because some deep, ancient part of you whispers, you wouldn't survive it if it left again. So you starve quietly, like the man who skips his own celebration dinner, not because he doesn't care, but because joy has always been followed by collapse. Like the woman who leaves the concert before the last song, because finishing something beautiful feels more painful than never having it at all. You keep life at arm's length. You pull back right when you should lean in. You end things on your terms, just to avoid being ended. And all of it makes sense. If joy is the prelude to grief, then cutting it short feels like control, like protection. But it's not protection. It's a rehearsal for a loss that hasn't happened yet and may never. And in all that rehearsal, you forget what it feels like to actually be in something, fully. You don't feel the music. You scan for the silence. You don't enjoy the light. You look for the shadow it casts. You're not broken, but you've become a master at defending yourself from the very thing you long for. And slowly your longing learns to quiet itself. This is the danger, because joy is not a reward for perfection. It's a muscle. And when you stop using it, it atrophies. You were not meant to stay in that fortress. It wasn't built to be permanent. It was a shelter for a storm that's long since passed. And now it's a prison of your own making. You can stay there, or you can start loosening the bricks, one moment at a time. And let's begin. Just one brick, just enough to see the sky. Healing isn't an epiphany, it's a repetition. It's a moment you live through again and again until, it changes meaning. The first time joy knocks, you freeze. The second time you flinch. The third time maybe you breathe. And honestly, that's the moment it begins, not because the fear is gone, but because you stayed. Even a second longer than last time, but that second is, everything. That second is how you rewire a nervous system that's been taught for years that joy is unsafe. There's a concept in trauma recovery called window of tolerance. It means the nervous system has a range for what it can safely hold. And for some, joy is actually outside that window. Not because it's too much, but because it was never allowed to settle in. So we push it away, we turn jokes into armor. We brush off kindness like it's an accident. We sabotage anything good before it can reject us. Like the girl who ghosted a friend after they finally said, "I really care about you." Not because she didn't care back, but because she did. And that felt like exposure, like risk. But there's another way, a way that doesn't involve perfect confidence or total readiness. It's the practice of staying just a little longer. You feel the warmth of the compliment, and instead of deflecting it, you let it sit for 3 breaths. You hear laughter at the dinner table, and instead of preparing for the moment to end, you allow yourself to enjoy it. You stand at the edge of something good, not sure if it will last, not sure if you can trust it, and you say, maybe I don't need to know yet. Maybe I can just be here now. This is how joy grows its roots, by being allowed to visit without needing a lease, by being held without being interrogated. Rumi once said, "Try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you. That includes the good. That includes the confusing. That includes the quiet joy that arrives like a breeze, unannounced, unpromised, and still worthy of being felt." You don't need to be fearless. You just need to stop letting fear be the only voice in the room. When it rises, listen. Then let a second voice speak. The one that says, "We're safe enough now, we've grown, we can hold this." This isn't about forcing yourself to be happy. It's about giving yourself permission to feel it when it comes, even if it's unfamiliar, even if it shakes, even if part of you still wants to turn away, because that part, it's still learning that joy no longer means danger. It's still catching up to the truth that joy, even when fleeting, is not betrayal, it's presence. And presence is what makes you real again. Before we move on, hold one joy in your mind, one you've turned away from in the past. Not to judge yourself, just to remember that it came. And it might come again, and next time maybe you'll let it stay. Joy doesn't knock like fear. It doesn't shout through the door. It doesn't come armed. It arrives like morning light, quiet, unannounced and vulnerable. And if you've lived too long in the dark, that light can feel, violent. So you squint, you shut the blind, you call it too bright, too soon, too much. So But the truth is, it's not too much. It's just unfamiliar. There's a story you've told yourself for years that if you welcome joy, it will betray you. That if you feel it, even for a moment, it will disappear and take part of you with it. So, you learn not to welcome it at all. You leave the room before the toast. You don't plan the trip you've always wanted. You flinch when someone looks at you with too much tenderness. Not because you don't want those things, but because you do. And if they leave, you're afraid they'll take your softness with them. You're not alone in this. There's a man who turned down his dream promotion, not because he didn't believe in himself, but because the last time he felt proud, life knocked the wind out of him. There's a woman who's never let anyone plan her birthday, because celebration feels like a target. This is what happens when fear of joy becomes your baseline. You confuse it with realism. You call it being grounded. But it's not groundedness, it's grief management. Carl Jung said, man needs difficulties, they are necessary for health. But he wasn't praising pain. He was pointing toward integration, toward facing the shadow so it no longer runs your life. And right now that shadow is telling you, don't trust this. But here's what it won't tell you. You've survived every collapse. You've rebuilt after every fall. You are not as fragile as the fear suggests. You are not the same person who was broken. So what would it look like to stay? To let joy land? Not because it's guaranteed, but because it's here, just here, now. You don't need to lock it in. You don't need to brace for its end. You just need to feel it while it's with you. Rumi once said, try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you. Let life live through you. Let this joy move through you, even if it's brief, even if it shakes you, even if another part of you wants to run. Because the alternative is a kind of living death, where joy arrives and finds no one home, where beauty comes close and is met with suspicion, where love is offered and you quietly decline. But that isn't you anymore, not fully. You're different now, because you're here, you're listening. And that means there's a part of you that still believes in light. Not blindly, not foolishly, but bravely. So stay, not because it's safe, but because you're finally strong enough to survive if it's not. Let's finish this. One more step. You've held the handle for a long time, tight, guarded, waiting. Sometimes you open the door just a crack, let in a moment, a kiss, a song, a second of stillness, but you always closed it again. You told yourself, not yet, I'm not ready. What if it leaves? But here's what joy has been trying to show you all along. It never asked for a promise. It never needed forever. It just wanted a moment where you didn't pre-lose it, a moment where you let it live. Joy doesn't demand your certainty. It asks for your presence, and presence is a risk. It means stepping into the now without reaching for the exit. It means letting the love in, not because you're sure it will stay, but because you're done living like it never could. Avoiding joy hasn't kept you safe. It's kept you suspended, somewhere between survival and living. You've tiptoed through your own life like a guest in someone else's home. You've edited your emotions before anyone could read them. You've been so careful not to want too much that you've forgotten how to want at all. But now, here you are, still standing, still breathing, still able to feel, and that is honestly no small miracle. You are not someone broken by joy. You are someone still capable of welcoming it even now, even after everything, even with the trembling. So let the door stay open. Not wide, not forever, just enough. Enough to feel the breeze, to hear the music, to let the warmth touch your skin before you second-guess it. Gibran wrote, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked." So maybe this fear you feel, it's not a warning, it's a signal that joy is trying to return, that something beautiful is near. And it doesn't want you to be fearless. It just wants you to be here, here, with your breath, here, with your scars, here, with your hands unclenched. You don't need a guarantee. You don't need to know how it ends. You just need to open, even if your hands shake, even if your voice quivers, even if your history screams louder than your hope. Open anyway, because joy is not asking for proof, it's asking for you. Before we part, ask yourself this: what's the one joy you've been pushing away? What if just this once you let it stay? Say it out loud or whisper it inside. Give it a name, let it live. And if you're ready, tell me below. Because we're not here to run anymore, we're here to return.